Hello, K2 mathematicians. This week we are talking about integers and the coordinate plane. So I'm going to record a short video talking about some common misconceptions that I expect you are experiencing and share a little bit more information about what you're going to be doing this week and some of the math that you've been working on. So I'm going to share my screen and walk you through some cool websites that you can use to graph on the coordinate plane and on a number line on your computers. Okay, we are going to start by looking at our number line here. This is a great website that you can get to. It's an application on the Math Learning Center. It's just one of many, but this is one that allows us to draw our own number lines and label them and plot points. So before we can do that, we need to review two important terms. The first is integer. My students really struggled this year remembering what an integer was and making a distinction between an integer and all positive and negative numbers. Excuse my dog for barking in the background. Okay, I think she's done. So an integer is not all positive and negative numbers. Instead, it's all whole numbers and their opposites. So you can see here on my number line, I have my middle point graphed as our 0. From there, moving to the right, you will see our positive integers, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Integers are whole numbers and they're opposites. So we have to remember what an opposite is. So if you look over here, I've written the definition. Opposite is the same distance from 0. So the opposite of positive 2 would be negative 2. That means both negative 2 and positive 2, by my first definition here, are indeed integers. Using a number line, we can also measure the distance from a point on our number line to 0. So if we're taking a look at this number line, I have 2 points plotted, one at negative 3 and one at positive 2. To find the distance between our point and 0, we have two strategies. Our first is simply to count. We can do this by counting the number of spaces between our integers and 0. 1, 2, 3. We know the distance from negative 3 to 0 is 3. We have another strategy we can use, and you might remember it from earlier this year. It's called absolute value. Our absolute value signs look like two straight lines around our integer. And when we take the absolute value of a number, we're finding its distance from 0. We're also finding its positive integer. So the absolute value of negative 3 is 3. Remember, absolute value is the distance from 0, and distances must be measured in positive numbers. So let's look at our second point, positive 2. So we have, again, two strategies we can use. We can count the number of spaces between our integer and 0. 1, 2. Or we can find the absolute value. This is where I see a lot of students making a small error. The absolute value of a positive number is not its opposite, but is a positive. Remember, absolute value means distance from 0. So the absolute value of positive 2 is not negative 2. It is instead positive 2. It is not negative 2. It is positive 2. Okay. This week on our Kahoot, you are also asked to think a little bit about different units and whether those units describe a scenario where the integer is negative or the integer is positive. So one scenario you could use is whether or not you have money, that's a positive value, or whether or not you owe money, that could be a negative value. So I'm going to write that on our number line here. If you owe money, it is negative, and if you have money, it is positive. Okay, now that we have a better understanding of our number line, we have refreshed our memory on what an integer is and what opposites are. We're going to take a look at the coordinate grid. This website is another one that I think you might have a lot of fun playing around with. It's called desmos.com, and it gives you a coordinate plane where you can graph lines and you can also plot points. So what I've done here is I've plotted 3 points. 1 home, 2 at Sequoia, and 3 at the library. What you're going to be doing this week is not just naming these points on the coordinate grid, but finding the distance between these points. So let's start by naming these points. When we are naming a point on the coordinate grid, we always start with our x value. We always start with our x value. I want you to remember that time and time and time again. I see students starting with their y value and then plotting their x value. Our x value is our horizontal number line. Our x value is our horizontal number line, and our y value is our vertical number line. So to get the coordinates for home, we are first going to travel on our x-axis, our horizontal number line. So I'm starting at 0, the origin, and traveling all the way to -2. I know that this has to be my x-axis or my x value because the point is on the line x equals -2. Next, I'm going to go upwards. Sometimes in my class I always said you have to walk to the stairs before you can climb them. So once I've walked to the stairs, I'm going to climb them and go up or down to meet my point. In this case, I'm going up. Once I've arrived at my point, I can scoot over to my y-axis to find the corresponding y value. You can see I've labeled this point -2, +4. We're going to do the same thing with the 2 remaining points. We're going to start at our origin, 0, 0. We're going to travel on our x-axis. And then we are going to either climb or descend the stairs to find and meet our point. Once we get there, we are going to identify the corresponding x value and the corresponding y value. This y value is halfway between -2 and -4. So if we quickly jump back to our number line, we can remind ourselves that the point between -2 and -4 is -3. So here Sequoia is plotted at the point -2, -3. Last, we have our library. We're starting at our origin. We're traveling along our x-axis first, and then we are going down those stairs to get to our library. Once we are at our library, we can find the corresponding x and y points. Once again, we have to remind ourselves what value is between 2 and 4 on our x-axis. Using our number line, we see that it's 3. And this library shares the same y value as Sequoia. So we know the coordinate is +3, -3. Once you've plotted all of your points, or you've identified the points on the coordinate grid by their x, y values, you can find the distance. You can find the distance one or two of two ways. Think back to that number line and that absolute value problem that we solved. The distance from a point to 0, and then from 0 to that point can give us the total distance. Another way to do this is to count. We can count our points starting at our original value. 1, 2, 3. Oh, excuse me, I'm drawing this really poorly. 4, plus an additional 1, 2, 3. So Sequoia is 3 points away from 0, and home is 4 points away from 0. So to find the total distance between home and Sequoia, we add those two values together and we get 7. Remember, our distances are always measured in positive numbers. You cannot be a negative number away from anything. Okay, so let's erase that. And we'll find the distance between Sequoia and the library. Okay, so once I've cleared my screen, which has taken a little longer than I expected, there we go. We can once again use two different strategies. This time, let's try absolute value. The absolute value of our x value. So the absolute value of -2, the distance from Sequoia to the y-axis, plus the absolute value between the y-axis and the library, which is 1, 2, +3. Once again, we have to remind ourselves to find the absolute value, we are finding the distance from 0, the distance from 0. And the distances are always measured in positive values. So the absolute value of -2 is 2. And I'm adding the absolute value of +3, which is +3. Therefore, we know the total distance between Sequoia and the library is 5 units. Oh, that's a terrible 5, is 5 units. I know this was just a very quick rundown of how to find distances on the coordinate grid. So if you have additional questions, be sure to talk to your teacher. Be sure to talk to your teacher. So here, let me try to get out of here. I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to talk to you one more time. This week, we're practicing plotting integers on a number line. Remember, integers are whole numbers and they're opposites. We're practicing finding the distance between 2 points on the number line and 2 points on the coordinate grid. If you have additional questions, please reach out to either Mrs. Phillips or Mrs. Hall or myself, and we'll be able to answer all of those questions for you. Have a nice day and good luck.